This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome into the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome to Week 4. We are on to Week 4, as Bill Belichick sort of once said. I am Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Better Sports Network High-Stakes Fantasy Football Show, and, of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Gonna tell everybody right now, is my humble pitch to you, that you should go to myffpc.com and play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. You just choose 10 or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. By kickoff on Sunday, watch them ride through the weekend's games. Plus, remember, you can only have one player per team. This is basically a carbon copy. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's very, very close to our world-famous FFPC Playoff Challenge that we do at the end of every season. You can enter for $35. You can win up to $200. You can enter for $35 or $200. You can win up to $2,500. Again, myffpc.com, myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with everyone, and get notified every time we go live on the channel, which the next time will be on Thursday. More on that upcoming later on in the program. I want to welcome in my guest this week. Been way too long since we had him on last. He is a champion of 10 high-stakes FFPC leagues. He's in the thick of it right now in not only the main event, but the Fantasy Pros Championship. A top, I believe, top 50, very close to a top 50 team overall, was just in the top 10 last week. So you know he's already been up there. Top 5 last week, if I remember correctly. And he's gunning for that $1 million grand prize. Please welcome back onto the FFPC airwaves, Mr. Chris Kennison. Chris, welcome aboard, dude.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing tonight?
Doing excellent. I'm feeling rushed. Like I'm not. My son had a flag football game tonight, and it was at 7:30 Central Time. And I thought, I'll get back no problem on time. Well, I didn't say. I wouldn't say it ran long, but we were fighting. I had to drop him off at home before I could come to work and do the show. So, like, I feel a little bit flustered. I'm trying to calm down now. It's hard to calm down after a massive Week 3. Holy mother of God! The points that we saw put up, the performances we saw from teams and from individual players. I cannot remember a week where a dude a dude in the backfield, running back, scores 4 touchdowns, and he is the second most productive player in his own backfield. Raheem Mostert. Everybody should have been talking about him. Nobody was. Everybody's talking about Devon Chan, and it's been crazy. Week 3, what was it like taking it in for you?
It was crazy. And they haven't done that in 50 years, we hear, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's insane.
Well, the old cliche, speed kills.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, like, we knew that going, like, we saw how excited Mike McDaniel was when he drafted Devon Achane, and obviously Tyree, and they did this all without Jalen Waddle too, which is even more astounding. It's really an indictment on the Broncos defense, really. But it was an incredible game. I was telling Dave Gerzak, I was watching Red Zone. I didn't know if I was watching replays or live because they all looked the same. It was all these Broncos defenders laying on the ground and then Dolphins running backs in the end zone. It was crazy. But that wasn't, I mean, like, we saw Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams. By and large, I'm sure you had some good teams, but you're probably hurt by it a little bit too, right?
Oh, sure. You can't have all the great players on your team. It's nice to see some of these guys pop out quick and help other fantasy teams out and help guys go on the waiver wire early and pick up some of these gems that'll help them the rest of the way.
That's what we'll try to do. We'll try to do tonight. We're gonna get into a lot of stuff on the show tonight. a lot of stuff on some of the players that Chris has on his team. We'll get into some stuff on the waiver wire as well. I want to lead things off tonight and talk about a guy who wasn't really on waiver wires, but he was on a lot of benches a couple of weeks ago. Then Austin Eckler went down, and people were licking their chops with Joshua Kelley, right? And Kelley went up against a really tough Titans defense in his first game as the starter. So we give him a pass for that. But then this past week against the Vikings, I mean, did next to nothing. And I don't really know what to make of it. It sounds like Eckler's going to miss again this week, Chris. Kelley is at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. After what we saw the last 2 weeks, are we better off sitting him, or are you going to roll those craps dice one more time just to see if we can squeeze something out of Kelley this week?
Well, let's take example the Vikings game. I think game script went the opposite way for him. The Chargers could throw left and right. Look at Keenan McCardle's numbers. He went for 215 yards he went for 400. Herbert threw for 405 yards and 3 TDs. Keenan Allen, 215 yards receiving. And if it wasn't him, it was Michael Williams, 7 catches, 121 yards and a TD. So game script didn't play into Joshua Kelley's game plan or help his fantasy value at all. And I think when the Vikings saw the run coming, they sniffed him out. So I'm almost going to give him, like you said, a little bit of a pass, as we did with Tennessee, as one of the best run stoppers. And look at the Raiders as a new opportunity for him if Eckler is out.
Kelley, yeah, I mean, like, I'll tell you what, if you're looking for running backs that you would want to bench instead of Joshua Kelley this week, I could get behind benching Breece Moore for him. I could probably get behind benching Khalil Herbert. Breece Hall. What did I say?
It's okay.
Whatever I said.
That's trying to help you run.
This is. I told you this is gonna be a rough start to the show.
That's okay.
Breece Hall. I would sit him. Khalil Herbert, definitely. I think you can make the case. You can make the case, honestly. This is interesting. What about Dameon Pierce at home against the Steelers or Joshua Kelley at home against the Raiders? That's a tough one.
It is. I'd probably take Pierce because he's more involved and he catches balls, especially if you're in PPR leagues. I still think Joshua Kelley, if Eckler's out, is not a bad. I mean, you can't give up on guys. You only have so many guys on your roster. Getting mad at a fantasy player is really not how you're going to win a championship if you throw them in a doghouse. They get their opportunities, play them if you can. Of course, if you have better opportunities on the bench, I would flex out somebody better over Joshua Kelley this week. But that all comes to your roster and your availability to do that.
Totally true. I don't know where you stand on this. Michael Gallup ended up, I think he had the same amount of targets as Brandon Cooks did this past week, but he actually had 6 catches to Cooks's 2 catches. Now, I think most people are still like, especially if you drafted Cooks, you're still like, okay, Cooks is still the guy. But in a vacuum here, and I should look to see who the Cowboys have this week before I start shooting my mouth.
Arizona?
No, that was last week.
I mean, no. The Cowboys are at home against New England.
New England, yes, exactly. What about Gallup versus Cooks? Where do you land in on this discussion? Are both of these guys startable? Are neither of them flexible for you at this point?
Well, I'm just going to back up quick and say I think this comes down to Dak Prescott. He's quite familiar with Michael Gallup in the system over the years. Brandon Cooks has came into the system off free agency or during whatever you want to say is now on the team, and they don't have a good rapport. Cooks has been hurt for a few weeks. On and off the practice field. I just don't think Dak's comfortable with him yet. Again, I think he's got a great rapport with Michael Gallup. And this could continue until Brandon Cooks works his way into there and gets more targets and takes more catches and proves to Dak that he can rely on him.
Yeah. And I think when it comes down to it, like if because a lot of people drafted Cooks as like their 4th, 5th, 6th receiver somewhere in there. Like at this point, we're not to buys. We got some injuries to deal with the wide receiver position, but like at this point, you shouldn't really even be entertaining starting Cooks, right?
No. That was kind of a desperate play right now. I know in the beginning of the year you might have him in your lineup with high hopes, but now you can see that he's not right. He's not ready yet, and he's not in the system, and he's not even part of the pecking order. So I would leave him on the bench. And
Gallup too is a guy that, like you said, he's already got the rapport with Prescott, and the full year after the ACL tear is now behind him. So this is fresh, fresh and clean Michael Gallup that we're seeing this year. You just mentioned it. The Patriots are in Dallas this week. A lot of stuff to talk about with New England here for the skill position players. The issue with Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, on the surface, and I'll be honest with you, I did not watch this game entirely closely, so I don't really know exactly how it was going. I know that it was not great for the Cowboys, the fact that they ended up losing to the Cardinals. But if you look at the backfield here, this game for New England, or idiot, again, I'm just falling all over myself tonight. If you look at how this ended up going I want to talk about the Patriots, not the Cowboys. Okay. If you look at the backfield, it was pretty close to a split here with the Jets, right? You had Elliott 16 carries. Ramondre Stevenson had 19. Elliott a little bit more productive. He got 5 yards a carry on his. Elliott got a catch for 7 yards. Ramondre Stevenson a catch for 3 yards. Now, I'm not saying bench Ramondre Stevenson. That is not where I'm coming from on this. Where I am coming from is, did we underestimate Ezekiel Elliott? This was a 5-point game. It's not like New England won this game by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Is Ezekiel Elliott actually sneaking on to our flex radars based on what happened in this game?
I think for sure. I look at this as lightning and thunder. They both have their what do you might call it? Their professional abilities in catching the ball and running through between the tackles. And this is what New England needed. They needed to be able to be offset, not one-dimensional with their running backs, and be able to give a 1-2 punch there. Where they lack, I think, is in their passing game. So they have to focus on their running game. Mm-hmm. And it looks like Dallas has a little bit of a problem stopping the run. And maybe we can see a little lightning and thunder with these two as a combo the rest of the year, providing good fantasy points for each other by complementing each other. So
yeah, I think that he looked. I mean, like the eye test is something that Elliott is passing for me. Something that he hasn't passed in the last couple of years. He looks leaner. He looks quicker. He looks more athletic than he has.
Well, I think sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I think that has a lot to do with them splitting time.
Yeah,
I think Elliott late in his career, he could still be a very top, 15, 20 productive back in fantasy football, as long as he gets 10 to 15 carries a game and the others go to the other running back. I think this is what you're going to see in the NFL right now is keeping some of your best players as fresh as possible to be able to sustain the game and the harsh punishment it takes to get through 60 minutes of football in the NFL. As we see now, how many backs and how many players are out already this year, it's crazy. So I think it's a great decision for these owners of these teams and these coaches to kind of go with this approach.
I think the other thing too is, like, for selfish purposes here, this makes it more challenging, maddening, and to a certain extent more fun for us too, as we try to figure out, running back starts and flex starts each and every week in our leagues. I want to get let's stay on the Patriots here, receiver wise. So I went after the week 1 game, I saw Kendrick Bourne get a ton of targets against what I think is a pretty talented Eagles defense. And he was doing a lot of it against James Bradbury, a Pro Bowl corner. This to me all suggested he was going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Patriots. I went heavy on him. I have him in a lot of leagues. I've started him like maybe once in 2 of the leagues since I acquired him in all these leagues. Mm-hmm. This past week, he technically was tied for the lead in targets for the Patriots with 5, tying Hunter Henry. He led them in receptions, 4 catches, 46 yards, and obviously dominated week 1. Week 2 was sort of the Devontae Parker week. Then this week, 3 targets, 2 catches, 19 yards. It wasn't great. But do we just need to okay, question 1, do we need to avoid starting all these guys? Like, is there nothing to be garnered from Patriots receivers by putting them in your starting lineups right now? And then number 2, if that's the case, which one of these guys, or which, if there's multiple guys, Patriots receivers are worth being rostered right now with the bye weeks coming up on the horizon here?
As I mentioned, I think the Patriots are built for a running attack, and I think the wide receivers are second thought in some of the system here. Juju, I think, has lost a step and maybe even his interest in playing. just my opinion. Devontae Parker was absent when you had Bourne in, and I believe Bradbury got hurt, if that's the right name for that corner, against him in that game, and left Bourne maybe with more opportunities there. That made him look like, I don't want to say fool's gold, but made him shine that week. Devontae Parker's back now, and I heard in preseason that he was kind of one of the stars in camp. He's maybe going to take up, 4 or 5 extra, 4 or 5 to 8 balls a game now too. It's going to be hard to trust any of these wide receivers since it's a run first game. And Henry Hunter could be the 1A, believe it or not, because he's, doing so well with the start this year. So I don't trust any of the Patriot wideouts going forward. Are some of them still worth stash on the bench? I think so. Devontae Parker, I like. I almost given up on Juju, but again, that's just me.
Right.
No offense, Juju. No offense to anyone who has him on their team. You're a Steelers fan.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I don't think he's going to win me a championship. I do say that if they get behind and they lose some wideouts, that Demario Douglas is a rookie. They say to watch out late in the season, so he could be a stash. But you got to have a pretty deep bench to put a guy on there right now. But thoughts down the road. But bottom line is I don't think it's worth anybody to roster besides maybe both running backs and Henry Hunter right now.
What about as I look at this game, I looked over at the box score. Garrett Wilson, I know he's not on the show sheet, but Garrett Wilson had 5 catches for 48 yards. Now, he did see 9 targets from Zach Wilson, who, by the way, the Jets signed Trevor Siemian to their practice squad today. Take that for what it's worth. Garrett Wilson, I don't know if you have him in a bunch of spots. Is he a guy, if you did have him, Chris, that you would be still rolling him out there and trusting him going forward? Or is it time, after you saw what Zach Wilson did, is it time to think about starting to bench Garrett Wilson, depending upon your options?
Well, I have a buddy I know named Andy Hickman who has him on the bench, and he was strong enough to have draft 4 wideouts to be able to put him on the bench for this. I think most people did draft Garrett Wilson in the top 2 rounds and have to play him. This early to try to put a fantasy football player in the doghouse and leave him there is somewhat foolish. You won't be happy one day he breaks off like Breece Hall did the first week and did 9 carries for 125 yards rushing. He's going to break out. He is their only weapon, and they're going to focus on him. They just brought in a new quarterback, so the sky's the limit for him. Let's just see what changes in the Jets higher up brass and see if we can't get a guy in there that help him save the season with him.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea too, because obviously nobody's quitting in New York, despite no Aaron Rodgers. Everybody is still keeping the faith. I know Zach Wilson had a lot of player support for him being the quarterback. Is it still as high as it was? I don't know, but I'm not going to pretend to know because I'm not in the locker room. Jets still fascinating to watch going forward to see what they could do. One of the at roster cutdowns for my dynasty leagues this year, Chris, I ended up getting rid of Jerick McKinnon in a lot of teams because I just didn't see the path for fantasy success, given the presence of Isaiah Pacheco and what he was able to do down the stretch, and the fact that, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still on that team, and they had some other options. Deneric Prince was a guy that I know a lot of people were excited about in drafting season. And I didn't see it with McKinnon. Now, part of his success, especially down the stretch last season, was him getting into the end zone. And every time I try to, talk up Jerick McKinnon going forward, the response I always got was, well, if he keeps scoring the touchdowns, then he's still fantasy worthy. But if he's not, well, then we have a problem. Jerick McKinnon, on the season, 3 carries, 7 yards, 7 catches for 53 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first 3 games. Now, I know they both came in quite the blowout here against the Chicago Bears. But this is what he did last year. He just always found the end zone. Is he a guy that you would consider his touchdowns no longer fluky and you'd start thinking about him as a second flex when the matchup's right for Kansas City? Or is my McKinnon love taking over my brain again, and I'm just way too excited about this player?
I'd have to say at the end there, you're way too excited about this player, but I agree. He could have games that pop like this, but he's an older back. You know, I live in Minnesota, and I remember with the Vikings, and he's been around, and I just don't think he's the future for Kansas City. So they're going to rely more on their younger players, and of course the Kelce Mahomes combo, which is basically the way they score. Besides what you call fluky, and that is anybody else besides Mahomes and Kelce scoring for Kansas City to me is fluky. Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to say Sky Moore and Tony and even Rashid Rice and the rest of the guys. I think it's hard to play any of those guys besides Mahomes and Kelce. I would say that McKinnon is it's a tough hold. I mean, if you don't have room for him, I would cut him. I cut him in one league for sure. Yeah. I think that's the only league I had him in. And I don't want to rely on him, and I'd like someone else to pick him up and take that challenge when he's playing me. So, and
the other thing too to keep in mind, this is like first of all, I hate cutting running backs because a lot of these guys are only like one injury away, right? But one of the things I look at is, okay, what's the opportunity here for this guy? What's his ceiling? What's McKinnon's ceiling? Is he ever going to be a 3-down back for Kansas City? No, probably not, which makes him more expendable. And then you have a guy come along, not Ty Chandler anymore after the Cam Akers trade, which I should ask you about too. But a guy like that, well, his ceiling is that he could be a 3-down guy, and that's why you stash guys like that. Bad example right now because the Vikings and Rams just hooked up on a trade. You're in Minnesota. How do you think this backfield is going to shape up now, given that they have Alexander Mattison, and once Cam Akers gets up to speed, who do you think is going to be the guy that you want to start? And number two, is it going to matter? Are either of these guys going to be effective this year?
Well, I think the Vikings backfield is going to be the combo of no lightning and no thunder. I think that the Vikings are so behind on their offense this year with their offensive line protecting and the way they're playing right now, and they throw the ball better than they run. So I think it's hard to trust any of those backs right now. One may come out and I think it's going to be a timeshare and a hot hand for sure. I don't think I could trust either one going forward. A flex on a bye week, throw them in there and roll the dice. But to count on either one of those guys going forward, I think it puts you in the same situation where Cam Akers was back in LA. And it puts him in where he's going to have one good game and then two bad games, and you're going to have to deal with it if you're going to use these guys consistently. I think, unfortunately, they don't have a back. I wish we would have signed, a good back. I wish we would have brought in one of the good. Even Hunt, when he came here, I think would have been a better opportunity because we're a throwing team now, and I think that's going to lead the Vikings the rest of the way, and leave it hard for you really count on any of the backs for the Vikings.
Does the addition of Akers make Mattison less startable, in your opinion, for the people who already had Mattison on their teams? I think a lot of them were just rolling him out there as their second running back every week, maybe as a flex too. But now that Akers is there, I mean, I guess we got to dial back expectations here for Mattison too.
Well, we'll see if Akers is who he is. If he's not who he is, I think Mattison is not going to lose that opportunity to be the starting back each week. Cam may just be a failure, and what McVay saw on him is going to come true, and we'll have to see. But I wouldn't give up. I like this week for Mattison. I would still start him against the Panthers this week. I think he's going to have good opportunities. I think Cam still has to learn the system. He has to come in, maybe get 8-10 carries. That's even if the game script goes the way where we can actually run the ball.
That's another great point.
Again, there's so many things that are unanswered right now. It's hard to count on either one of those guys.
I was I can't remember if you knew this or not, but I'm a Packers fan. I live in Wisconsin, and I looked at this Packers Saints game last week. Before it started, when I saw Jair Alexander was going to be out, I'm like, boy, I really don't see them beating New Orleans because you need a really tough. You need all the corners you can get against New Orleans with Rashid Shaheed, Michael Thomas, and Chris Olave. And sure enough, Chris Olave 8 for 104. That surprised nobody. Surprised that Rashid Shaheed never got a catch. But Michael Thomas, 6 catches, granted only for 50 yards, but he was second on the team in targets. So far this season, he's already got 18 catches through 3 games. Again, only for 166 yards. Hasn't found the end zone yet. But, man, I look at how involved he is in the game, and obviously this question kind of depends upon how long Derek Carr is going to be out. But I look at Thomas, man, eventually I think he's going to get hurt. But until then, is he every week flexible based on, I guess maybe we skip week 4 to see what he does with Winston. But I think like the way he was looking with Carr, man, he was surprising me quite a bit. I did not think we'd ever see this version of Michael Thomas again.
Hey, he's finally healthy, which again, I agree with you. I never thought maybe he'd come back and be this productive in the NFL again. And as long as he is, yes, I would start him. And yes, I would count on him. He is kind of in the slot receiver, which Derek Carr relied on him as dump off passes when Ali was not open. And Rashid, as you mentioned, was unavailable. And right now they don't have Kamara in there to dump passes off to. So he could be actually, part of the process right now where he was the easiest to dump off over the running backs and some of the other options Derek Carr had. But now again, you mentioned Derek Carr's gone. Is Winston going to lean on Thomas? Is Winston going to lean on Kamara? We don't know. But I would still start him, knowing that he's going to be out there and he gets a lot of plays. And so far he hasn't proven to you that he should be on the bench in the first place. So again, as long as he's healthy, as long as he's in that system and he's playing into the slot, I would roll with him.
Yeah, but it's tough to sit him this week too. I mean, unless you got some baller wide receiver options. Michael Thomas at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're coming off a short week too. I like that quite a bit. I missed this in the chat. I'm gonna put it in right now. Broward Bravado chiming in this week. Chris, who do you like better as far as the start goes? Is it Alexander Mattison, who is on the road taking on the Panthers, or is it James Conner, who is also on the road taking on the San Francisco 49ers?
Well, let's look at Kareem Williams for the Raiders, or excuse me, the Rams, who just played against the 49ers and had a pretty good game. Conner is going to be the 1A back. He's going to get most of the time. He's going to get most of the catches. I would start him over Madison in a heartbeat.
I go back and forth on this. Right now, I am leaning towards Conner. I look at how involved he was last week. I look at how Arizona can win that game, and it's trying to keep. I can't believe I'm saying this. Trying to keep Brock Purdy off the field, but it's Brock Purdy, it's George Kittle, it's Deebo Samuel, who by the way let everybody knew that he was still a legit wide receiver. Brandon Ayuk could be healthy again to play this week as well. So and it's going to require a big effort on the Arizona offensive line's part. But I think that they're up to it, and I think Conner can put up some numbers this week. Don't forget about those passes too. If Dobbs wants to dump off, he's going to be able to find James Conner there. So I would lean towards Conner over Madison as well. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. I have heard a narrative out there from pundits believing that Romeo Doubs is actually the number 1 wide receiver for Green Bay and not Christian Watson. High-stakes fantasy football drafters would beg to differ based on where they drafted these guys. I don't personally think that we have seen enough of Doubs, enough from the performance of Doubs to say, man, he's the true alpha. Watson's really going to be fighting for scraps once he gets healthy enough to play, which could be Thursday against the Lions. We'll see. I still think it's Watson here, but Doubs is impressing. Your thoughts on Watson versus Doubs?
Well, for one, since we just left off with Michael Thomas, I believe Christian Watson might be the new version of him if he doesn't get his butt on the field. So he's pretty scary to me. Doubs had the 1A corner on him, in these last 2 games or 3 games since he's been out, and he's been impressive. I also think that the rookie, Jaden Reed's been impressive too.
Yes.
And I think when Watson comes back, to believe it or not, I think they're all going to complement each other. But I do believe with what we've seen out of Christian Watson in the past, when he's healthy, he is the 1A alpha of the bunch. Now, Doubs might have some impressive games going against the 2B corner, and Jaden Reed's going to have some great games in the slot, maybe if he's in there against, whoever's guarding him when the others 2 are being guarded. So I would stick with Christian Watson as still the one that I would say is the alpha right now. Could be proven wrong by the end of the year. Injuries always, dictate a lot, but Romeo Doubs is going to be a good start. I think he's part of that system where it's like a Thielen is for Carolina and some of these guys where that second wideout, like Adele for Houston. And some of these guys are going to get plenty of volume because they're going to be the one that has the easiest coverage.
Brad Bravado saying love is looking lovely. That's cute to say. I don't know if I'm willing to say lovely yet.
Shot at the Packers. I was born in Wisconsin too.
Where are you? What part of Wisconsin? I asked you.
Menominee Falls.
Menominee Falls. Oh, you're from the Falls. Yes, absolutely, fantastic. The underlying numbers for Love, his completion percentage is what worries me. He's throwing a ton of incompletions. I looked at that game against New Orleans. Now, granted, Green Bay could not get a run game going, but they were missing their top running back, their top left tackle, their top left guard. All three of those guys are Pro Bowlers. They were missing Watson, obviously. So Love was fighting, a lot of things going on. But at the same time, man, he was throwing to a lot of covered receivers. And I hope that fixes itself when Watson gets back in there and the defense has to account for him as well. Once he starts completing more, he was 22 of 44 on Sunday. 22 of 44, including one pick. So I think there's going to be room for improvement. He's going to have games like this. But I will say Love is looking lovely in comparison to what I thought he was going to be all right, Chris. I didn't expect he'd be this good this early. So in terms of my expectations, I think it's a little bit higher. How do you feel about the Packers offense once they do get Watson and Jones back?
I think they're going to be a force to reckon with in the NFC Central. I mean, I'm pretty surprised how quick they turned around with Rodgers out. I believe he's a very impressive but older rookie. Let's say this is finally his first year. He's got some kinks to work out. He's trying to carry the Rodgers name on his back. He's trying to carry the Packers on his back. I think that over time he's going to develop into a really, really good quarterback, and like I said, be a threat for many years to come. He's got plenty of young weapons around him to grow. It's a perfect team to grow with now as a Packer fan for the next 10 years. I mean, they've got a great tight end. They've got three great wideouts. Aaron Jones is on his way out, but they'll draft a running back, and A.J. Dillon will fill in, or a veteran when they need one in the next few years. But pretty impressed with the Packers organization and what they're doing, and I do believe Love will get better and the Packers will get better. And if you look at their schedule, I believe they're one of the best players to have in fantasy for fantasy playoffs.
Could be. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point as well. Now, waivers have not taken place yet this week, Chris. And maybe you'll be dropping this guy. Maybe he'll just be on your bench. I don't know if you drop him. That might be premature. But maybe he's just going to be on your benches going forward. You did have a lot of Juwan Johnson on your teams this year. Why are you a believer in Juwan Johnson?
Well, this funny you ask. So in preseason, I read an article that Derek Carr mentioned that he says Juwan Johnson's going to be a fantasy stud. He told anybody who plays fantasy football. I don't know if anybody else has heard about it, but if someone wants to chime in and say they heard it, they heard it. But I do remember him saying that, look out, Juwan Johnson's going to be a fantasy stud. Now, usually this is a good sign for things to come. So I took a lot of interest in him and put him on a lot of teams. Well, so far the opposite.
Right.
I'm worried that the trend will continue this season. Not only Juwan being ignored in the offense, but Taysom Hill and Jimmy Graham have outplayed him in fantasy already. With a pass catching Kamara coming back and Olive, the 1A, and Michael Thomas and Rashid, I just can't trust him. And he's one of those guys where, hey, you know what? Every once in a while you make a bad call, but I have no problem letting him go. Especially in the FFPC where you get 1.5 per catch. You cannot afford to keep putting him out there and getting so far behind Kelce unless Kelce falls in love with Taylor Swift and leaves the NFL. So I am down on Juwan. I made a call on him. He did have good prospects. There were a lot of other scouts and people that said, he's a good fantasy pick, but so far I don't see him fitting in now or becoming relevant enough to say, okay, I'm going to keep him and start him moving forward.
Yeah, it might take an injury or whatever. I did find that it was actually Derek Carr told his brother David Carr to draft Juwan Johnson in fantasy football this year. So
there you go.
That report's out there. And I'll tell you what, and it's not like you were falling all over yourself to draft them. The price was right in drafts with Juwan Johnson. I mean, you didn't have to pay a lot to get him.
Exactly.
Moving on here, waiver wire. Let's talk about this. Now, I think that there are guys out there. I think Devon Achane is not one of those guys. He's pretty much taken everywhere.
Achane?
Yeah. Yes, and well, you know what's weird about this Achane thing is he told somebody, Devon A-Chain told somebody from ESPN before the NFL draft, I want my name is pronounced A-Chain. Then on Sunday, he told Peter King from NBC Sports that it's actually pronounced A-Chan. And I'm like, you got to pick one, man. Like, you can't. This is like the whole, and I brought this up too. I was talking with somebody about this. This is like Travis Kelce, whatever it was a year or two ago, actually saying like, oh yeah, I've let everybody mispronounce my name for years. It's actually Kelce, not Kelce. And at that point, we're not changing it. I'm like, dude, we're like a decade in. But besides the point, let's talk about the.
Hey, first of all, I want to simplify it. Let's just say it right now on air. Let's just nickname him A-Train.
The A-Train, yes.
The A-Train.
Now the A-Train, the original The A-Train, Anthony Thomas for the Bears.
Yep.
I thought he was going to be great, and he had one good season, and then it was not good after that. So he could be the true A-Train going forward. Now, exactly. He's not out there in a lot of leagues. I don't know who you're necessarily targeting. I don't know if there's, again, we talk about running backs, the injury away type guys, if you got room for them. Joshua Palmer is actually surprised that he was out there in as many leagues. And I saw Adam Thielen get dropped. Those are some of the guys that I'll probably end up going after. Your thoughts on those guys, Chris, and just really in general, the targets that you're going after when you place your waiver wire bids this week?
Well, I played fantasy football since I was 16 and I'm 56. And I've noticed, with your fab money over the years that most of the guys are going to find that are going to really pop and make a big difference. They're usually in the first 4 weeks before the bye weeks start. This is when we saw Puka Nacua, Tuda Atwater. We saw A-Train. We've seen some of these guys emerge, Jerome Ford, and guys that if they're on the waiver wires, you don't want to let these guys go to other teams. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I spend about 80%, believe it or not. This, others may not, want to go this route, want to save their money on a lot of these players before it's too late. Right. And I believe, weeks 5 on, you're going to find some diamonds in the rough. There's going to be some guys that go down and guys that pop up and take these spots that no one thought about, and they're going to be great pickups. But usually most of the guys are gone in the first month. So I believe that if there's anybody out there that is worth being rostered, should be on your team or on somebody else's team, and it's up to you if you want to take a shot at them. There are guys that you can hang on for the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And we know in fantasy football, there's many seasons in fantasy football. You have your regular season, and you have teams that fall out of it late in the year, and they play new players. And you might want some money to be able to pick up some of them new guys they're trying out. But I've also watched people start out 1-4, and at the end of the year, I look in and they got 100% of their fab money left. I don't understand that whole mentality of why didn't you at least throw somebody on your roster? So it's up to the individual, but I believe that you really want to go after some of these guys and take a shot at them. You can't win. Some of the reasons I'm in the top, and I'm not a scout. I don't go to any of these things. I don't talk to anybody behind doors about any fantasy. I just believe that you have to take risks, and some of these risks you have to reach, and it can pay off horribly, and it can pay off huge. So it's part of the game.
I think too a couple of things like David Hubbard, 2016 FFPC Main Event co-champion. He says that he loves to blow his money early in the season because he doesn't want to have to be saddled with the responsibility of using it all over the course of the season, where if he uses it right away, there's less for him to worry about. And it's just kickers and defenses, bye week, injury stuff after that. Sure. I go heaviest early in the season. As much like I'm not a scout either. It's a great line. I'm not a scout. We're not scouts. We don't know. Even the best people, I didn't really see the Kendrick Bourne thing coming week 1, and that's certainly not looking like a stellar buy on my part, but I don't really necessarily regret it because I trust the process. And the process usually, not always. There's a lot of times where people go in and spend way too much money on a player that ends up being awful. But usually I trust the process, and that's why I go heavy on these players to begin with. The other thing to keep in mind is that some of these teams, as they fall out of contention, will, like you just pointed out, will not be spending their fab at the end of the year. And sometimes you can actually get players that should be going for more. You can get them cheaper in the Fantasy Pros Championship, the FFPC Main Event, so on and so forth. I've noticed that when I was playing the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. I've noticed that in KFFSC leagues. I've noticed it in my private dynasty leagues too. Like you can even, yes, it stinks to be hamstrung on your budget late in the season, but at the same time, it's not the worst thing in the world, and you could still be competitive on the waiver wire to do it.
Sure. Yeah, you'll be amazed late in the season when you have $50 left in your fab and you put out $2 and you get the guy you want.
Right, exactly. Yes, yeah.
This week I blew about most of my money. I'm down to about 100 in a league, and I put $8 out on Tank Dell and got him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's buy of the week. That is nice work. I guarantee all the people watching on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook are going to be super ticked now. Like, why can't I be in a league? Alex B Keaton, I guarantee he's going to say, how do you get taken down for $8? Okay, last question here for you. Oh my God, Broward Bravado, you unbelievable. I'm on Ross St. Brown. I bought last week on waivers. I need to find out what league it was that St. Brown got dropped in. That is crazy town banana pants, Broward. Wow. Okay, final question for Chris Kennison tonight. Let's look at week 4. I don't know if you've set your lineups or how closely you've looked at them yet. We've talked about some sleepers already for week 4, but if you want to go back to them, that's fine. I'm just kind of curious, one sleeper that you think not a lot of people are going to be starting this week that they probably should be, and then a must-start guy or a seemingly must-start guy that you think people are going to be disappointed with in week 4.
Well, I'll start out with a must-start guy and be nervous about. And this some might laugh here, and let me explain my reasoning on this. But I think Travis Kelce.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the deal. He's on the road against the Jets. The Jets can be a very stingy defense. They shut down Henry Hunter. Now, most people that and especially in FFPC, drafted Kelce in the first round. So now you have a week where you might start out 0-3. You might be 1-2, and you've got since he missed week 1,
mm-hmm.
You got Kelce, and you're going up against this Jet defense, and you need 20+ fantasy points out of your first round pick to try to average that to kind of hang in there with those picks out of the first 15 to be competitive. And I think this is a week where they could keep him under 20 fantasy points. So I know that sounds silly. I know he's one of the best.
And that is one of the most aggressive answers to this question, and I absolutely love it, Chris. That's fantastic.
I like it too. Yeah. Plus his mind, I know where his mind is right now, and it might not be on football.
Yeah, it could be on something else.
I would have no problem taking a week off with a bad injury with her. But
she's I can't believe I know this, but I read about it today that her Eras tour does not resume until November, and she's going to Argentina. There's no question Travis Kelce might abscond to South America for a week with Taylor Swift and then come back. Maybe in the bye week, maybe not on the bye week. I don't know.
We might have an imposter in there for a few weeks with that 87 on. Did you see some of the questions she was asking? What is a field goal? They actually showed.
I saw that. Yeah.
What is a field goal?
And she had like a cheat sheet to like know what to do when she was watching the game. Very unbelievable. To your point, and before anybody says,
you idiot.
Yeah, before anybody says like, okay, this is crazy.
The Kelce lovers.
The Chiefs are 9.5-point favorites, and the total is at 42.5. To me, you could make a case for this being a Pacheco grinded out type game. Maybe they get Rice and Tony involved more, and they don't rely much on Travis Kelce. I don't know. Listen, Chris, you are a stronger man than me. I am not strong enough to sit him. I understand your reasoning, why you might want to look at that. And it could work out. We'll see.
No, I'm not saying sit Kelce. You just said
expect less. I mean, people might be disappointed this week in Travis Scott. There's a very real possibility of that. What about a guy that you think is getting disrespected, that you think is going to have a big week 4 in fantasy football?
I'm not necessarily use the word so harsh of disrespect, but I think it's Jalen Warren's time to shine. I think Najee's done. I just think if the Steelers want to move forward, they found some speed in Calvin Austin that they knew they had, and they, Allen Robinson got a dinged up ankle, so that's probably history now with him. So they're going to get some more speed out there. Pickens looks pretty good. Pickett's coming around with the new offensive coordinator calls, and I think Jalen Warren's time's coming. I think this could be his breakout week. So I think he's a great start, and I would have confidence starting him moving forward.
Okay, so Jalen Warren this week, I'm trying to find him right now.
Houston?
Yes, I think that's accurate. Houston, yes. And I mean, I like him. I like him as a flex this week for sure. He's another guy too. Like, not that I want to hammer Breece Hall here more, but he's another guy that I think you can make the case of starting Warren over Hall this week. Warren over Khalil Herbert too, based on what's going on in New York. So I think there's plenty of there's plenty of Jalen Warren love out there. And we saw it too, and you saw this, Chris, in drafts. Like, he was usually one of the first backup running backs off the board because of what we saw and how he ended the season last year. And I said on my local fantasy football show here in Northeast Wisconsin, I said my bust of the year was Najee Harris. I can't make a good case for him anymore for fantasy. It used to be the volume. Now, even when he's getting the volume, he's not necessarily working out, which stinks because I know we had a lot of high hopes for him too. But it is what it is. I have high hopes for you, my friend, winning that $1 million grand prize this year. Chris Kennison. By the way, anybody who's watching this, who's in the industry, Chris is a free agent. Happy to do to climb aboard any website, any content creator out there. You'd be lucky to have Chris as far as a high stakes angle on everything. Chris, what's the best way to contact you if they want to contact you?
Probably best would be my email.
Do you want to give that email out, or should I just say email me and then I'll put you in touch with Chris? It's up to you.
That's that'd be the best way.
Okay.
So then you'll have my email, and then you can pass it on after that too. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. So email me, Eric, ERIC, at myffpc.com if you're interested in checking out Chris's chops. And obviously, I will put you in touch with them. Chris, thank you so much for hopping aboard tonight. Great job. Always fun to talk shop with you. And good luck in week 4 and beyond, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric. And I hope to talk to you later in the year when I'm up there again.
You're cashing that big check, baby.
Say hi to Farrell for me, too.
I will do that. Absolutely. I will say hi to him. Chris, be good, man. Enjoy the games this week.
Take care. Good.
Kris Kennison, ladies and gentlemen, a guy who has won 10 FFPC high-stakes leagues over the course of his career, joining us on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown this week. Okay, so that is going to complete tonight's broadcast. We'll be back on with the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown next Tuesday. We're going to talk with longtime FFPC, longtime high-stakes players, Chris Hart and Toby Bielkini. They will join us. They had a team. I didn't look to see where they are this week. I think they're in the top 20 of the main events. They're going to talk about that. We'll have them on. And then this Thursday on the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show, Mr. Fantasy Mojo himself will join me. Darren Armani is going to hop aboard as my guest co-host from 7 to 9 Eastern time this Thursday night on the Better Sports Network. That will air on all the Better Sports social channels as well as the FFPC social channels too. So make sure you're checking that out. And then Friday night, Farrell Elliott, myself on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour right here on these airwaves, going to be talking with the Week 2 FFPC Main Event leader, Jeff Hallis. He will join us on the program this Friday. So you got you have Armani on Thursday, you got Hallis on Friday, and then a week from today, you'll have Hart and Bielkini, and that is going to be a lot of fun. A reminder to go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There's no draft or salary cap for these teams. You just choose 10 players or 12 players by Sunday's kickoff, and then you just watch them ride throughout the weekend. Remember, only one player per NFL team, $35 to enter or $200 to enter. Win up to $2,500. You can play in 10, 30, or 100-team leagues in that. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified on this channel. And the last thing, I'll send out these warnings throughout the week via email and on the airways. We have London this week, an early start. I believe it's 9:30 Eastern time, so make sure you're getting in your lineups early. And remember that waivers will not process early that day. They're still going to go off at 10 a.m., so you will not be able to get anybody in that early game on Sunday. So just a public service announcement, so you're not upset about it, so you know about it right now, and you can take care of waivers tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We will see you back here on Thursday night at 10 p.m. with Fantasy Mojo's Darren Armani and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Thanks for watching, everybody.